Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Roman America podcast. If you haven't already, remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. It would really help me out. Honestly, make sure, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and so make sure to follow me on all platforms. And so let's get into it. So I'm a little late to the party, but there's something I'd like to talk about today a little bit in depth, and that is the disaster of the America First United conference event that took place. At this point now, I think it was a week and a half ago, if I remember correctly. I think it was, what day was it? May 9th? Or May 2nd, sorry. Yeah, it would have been May 2nd. So probably, it's a week and a half ago. So 10 days or something like that. Yeah, so I think it was May 2nd, if I'm correct. It was roughly about a week and a half ago. So anyone who's been on Twitter, following on Twitter, would know that the America First United conference was this conference that was set up by a few different people. I think the four key people that were involved in it was Amy Dangerfield, Michael Rechtenwald, Jake Shields, and Dan Bilzerian. And the reason this caused controversy is because it's an event called America First, is in the name. However, there was one notable person who's been, probably one of the biggest contributors, if not the biggest, some people argue, to the America First movement, and that is Nick Fuentes. Nick was completely absent from the event. He had nothing to do with it. And many people see this as, there's a lot of different people who have a lot of different perspectives on the event, but a lot of people see this, no matter how you slice it, as this event was a complete flop. It was a complete blunder. There wasn't too many people who showed up in person, and a lot of that, and that was because the event was invite only. I think on the YouTube channel, only like 500 people watched the live stream, so not very many people even watched it live. And most of the speakers there were people that were completely irrelevant. Most of the speakers there, people didn't even know. Like, I think one of the speakers there was Morgan Ariel, who I don't really know much about her, but I really can't stand her. Because, she's very staunchly anti-Catholic. She does not like Nick Fuentes. I don't know. Apparently some people claim she has an STD. I don't know. But the point is, she was one of the speakers, and there was, a couple other people. I think Dan Bilzerian video called in. He wasn't there in person, but I think he spoke there via webcam. What else? I think after the event, during the event, but after the speeches were given, I think Jake Shields did some interviews with some people, so there was definitely some people there involved, and there were some, I don't want to say groypers, but there were some people aligned with Fuentes who did show up at the event thinking it was going to be about a genuine America First event, and many of them say that, they didn't know what they were getting into and that they got duped, and for many of them, I don't really see too much reason to suspect why that would be false, or why they would be lying or something, but I guess what this really is about is trying to imagine what the America First movement would look like if Nick Fuentes weren't involved. Because nobody can deny Nick's impact on the movement. The America First movement has existed for over a century in America, ever since really the First World War. And then it died down. And then it existed again during the Second World War. And then when the United States entered the war, it disappeared. And then you saw a little bit of a revival of it in the 1990s, I would say, with, certain paleo-conservative icons like Pat Buchanan and stuff like that. And to a certain extent, it was revived with, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, with people like Ron Paul and the Tea Party movement. But it never really took off the way that it did until Nick Fuentes decided to take over the movement and essentially become its leader. One could argue that he became the leader. He started a show called America First. So, his legacy is tied to that term, no matter how you slice it. But anyways, what this conference was trying to imagine was a movement, an America First movement without Nick. And what the event clearly showed is that the movement would go nowhere if he had no involvement. Because, yeah, like I said, barely anybody was there. Nobody watched the live stream. And truth be told, there were a lot of people that shouldn't have been there. Like, people like Jake Shields and Dan Bilzerian are what you call low IQ anti-Semites, where all they focus on is, the Jews, like, and nothing else. It's Israel and the Jews. That's really the only issue that they seem to talk about. But really, America First is about more than just that. And then also, there were certain people that were there, like, for example, I think there was a Muslim speaker there who apparently allegedly doxed an ICE agent or something like that. So she's anti-ICE. So automatically, you can see that, liberals and left-wingers, like, you can't find common ground with those people on that issue. And if you're going to call yourself an America Firster who supports, America First immigration policy and, no mass migration and mass deportations for everyone here illegally, you can't associate with people like that, with people who are going to, do that. And so, they're really, no matter how you slice it, the event was a failure. It was a complete flop. And this just shows how messed up the America First movement would be without Nick. Really, there's no other way to slice it. And, and that also leads me to essentially what happened next. So right after Nick said he had nothing to do with the event and started calling out the event and stuff like that, then immediately what it did was people that he thought were his allies or friends once again turned on him, and it looks like permanently for good, permanently now. People such as Amy Dangerfield, Dan Bilzerian, and Jake Shields. Like Dan Bilzerian put out a tweet saying that calling Nick a Fed, which, okay, that's just a buzzword now, and it doesn't really mean anything. Honestly, nobody who actually knows anything about Nick would think that he's a Fed. I mean, come on. The guy's been doxxed. The guy's been debanked. The guy's been deplatformed. The guy was put on a no-fly list for at least 6 months. This guy, if this guy's a Fed, he's definitely the worst Fed ever. I don't think he's a Fed. I really don't see any evidence of him being a Fed. I mean, he was subpoenaed, if I remember correctly, for his involvement in January 6th, which, by the way, he wasn't even on Capitol grounds that day. He was giving a speech at the Peace Monument, which is, 20 to 30 feet or whatever from the Capitol lawn, but it's not on Capitol grounds. It's actually if you look at the map, it's actually quite a ways from the Capitol. But point is, he wasn't even on the Capitol grounds, and, and honestly, he wasn't even there for that long that day. So, point is, he's not a Fed, and the people claiming he is a Fed don't know shit. They don't know anything, and I really am getting tired of people calling him a Fed over and over again, and I don't care who it's from. But anyways, so Dan Bilzerian decides to crash out on him and call him a Fed, and then, of course, he calls him, a gay Mexican or whatever, which, again, that's nothing new. People have called him that a million times by now. And essentially what happened next was, that this essentially caused Nick to turn on Dan for good reason. And because let's face it, Dan is not a serious person politically. I mean, I know he's trying to run against Randy Fine in the, I think, 6th district in Florida, but that, for those who are aware about it, Dan was planning a rally and a campaign event in Florida. I think it was today, or maybe it was tomorrow. It was either so today's Tuesday. It was either today or tomorrow, Wednesday. I can't remember which day, but it was basically in the middle of the week, in the middle of the work week specifically, and he was planning a campaign event, and he tried to get everyone riled up saying, hey, come to the event, all that stuff. Well, last night, at the last minute, he canceled it. So he canceled an event for a campaign that he supposedly is trying to run. And by the way, here's the bizarre part. The location of the event wasn't even in the district that he supposedly is running for. It's like 50 miles away. 50 miles away from the district he supposedly is running for. And by the way, Dan doesn't even live in Florida, so why the fuck is he trying to run for a position in Congress in Florida? I mean, other than to troll Randy Fine or whatever. The dude lives in Las Vegas. He's lived in Las Vegas a good portion of his life. That's where he still lives, pretty much. So I really don't see how this was a win, in any way, shape, or form. The dude is not running a serious campaign, and plus, there's already kind of an anti-Israel candidate running in that district against Randy Fine, and his name is Aaron Baker, who Nick is. I wouldn't say Nick has. I don't think Nick has officially endorsed him, but Nick has expressed sympathy and some amount of support for Aaron Baker, and so there's really no reason why Dan should be running, because he's just going to split up the votes. All it's going to do is divide the voter base of people who want to get rid of Randy Fine in the primaries. So why is he even running other than, what you would call sabotage? So that's one thing. And then here's another thing. So here's another way you can tell he's not serious, because Nick told a story. He told a story, I think it was last night on his show, and I think it was the show before that, although I don't remember, but definitely last night on his show. And over last weekend, Saturday or Sunday, one of those 2 days, Lucas Gage told the exact same story, which is that they were both apparently invited at one point or another to Dan's house to talk about politics and stuff like that. Apparently both of them arrived at Dan's house. Dan had a security guard out front and apparently told both of them to put their phones on the kitchen counter while they go into the living room or the basement or whatever so they can talk about stuff. And apparently Dan started talking about, let's just say, committing acts of violence against Israeli officials and against also people like Ben Shapiro. And, Lucas Gage himself said in a Twitter space that he thought it was just locker room talk, because Lucas Gage has been in the military and, he's, somewhat into guns like Dan is. And so he thought it was sort of, he thought it was just two former military guys, he thought it was just locker room banter, as he described, locker room talk. And he thought, okay, well, I can understand why he would say this stuff to me. We're just joking around and all that stuff. But he thought it was really suspicious that Dan said the same thing to Nick. And Nick himself, immediately, for him, that was a red flag. He's like, I don't want to be involved in this because he himself said, I don't support committing acts of violence against other people. And so really this is, by the way, caused accusations towards Dan, where people are starting to accuse Dan himself of being a Fed, which, you can say he's not, but the dude does have a shady background. I mean, the dude's, for example, excuse me. Anyways, so, yeah, Dan does have a shady background. I mean, the dude claims to be a world champion poker player. The dude is, there's no record of him winning any poker championships. The dude claims to have been a Navy SEAL, but he was kicked out of the program a week before he was supposed to graduate for a safety violation. And also a lot of his money comes from a trust fund run by his daddy, a billionaire named Paul Bilzerian, who's been indicted and convicted for fraud and embezzlement in the past. So there's already some shady shit going on there. And so there's really so point is, Dan's a shady character and he's got a shady background. And for him to say stuff like that to Nick is a red flag. It's definitely very sus. And so really what we have to understand is that, that Dan is not a serious person about politics. He's not a serious person. And, he thinks, I don't know. Point is, his rhetoric is not serious. He doesn't have any long-term strategies. He just basically just throws shit at the wall and hopes that it sticks. That's really all he does. And quite frankly, Nick made this point on his show last night. He said that 2026 is the year where the America First movement essentially has to restructure. They have to restructure and weed out all of the low IQ anti-Semites who are not serious about politics, who are not serious about getting into positions of power in order to change the fundamental political structure of this country. And yeah, people like Dan are not serious. People like Jake Shields are not serious. I mean, I don't know if Jake I don't know if Jake says all that shit that he says because he has CTE and brain damage or whatever, but that seems to be what it's all about. And then, and then also take, for example, Amy Dangerfield, for example. I mean, Amy Dangerfield is not even an American citizen. She's born in Australia. I mean, you can tell that obviously she has an Australian accent, and she's not even obtained American citizenship. She's in the process of obtaining American citizenship, but she hasn't done it already. And she used to be an employee, used to work for Adam Sosnick. For those who don't know, Adam Sosnick is essentially one of the guys on Patrick Bet-David's podcast. He's the guy that people can't stand. In fact, a lot of people don't even watch Patrick's show anymore because they can't stand Adam. Because Adam is he's a hardcore shill for Israel who tries to repeat talking points from Republican Party talking points from 20 years ago about why we need to essentially, about why we need to keep getting into wars in the Middle East because, they're just trying to kill us all and all that stuff. And, so yeah, that's who Amy Dangerfield used to work for in the past. And it really does, it's hard to convince me that she did a complete 180 in such a short amount of time. I mean, not saying that it's impossible, but, it's almost like a guilt by association thing. I mean, simply the fact that she used to be associated with Adam Sosnick shows that, you definitely need to look into her. And all that stuff. And also there's this, also people think that her husband is like transgender, which I don't know if he is, but people seem to think that she married a trans person. There's that. And then also some video of her kissing another woman, which I was like, all right, minus 10 points. My view, literally that video alone, which is only 10 seconds long, but that 10-second video already, I was like, all right, minus 10 points. Lost a bunch of respect for you for doing that. So, yeah, definitely not something that, and honestly, hey, kind of glad that Nick doesn't want to associate with her anymore. And so, yeah, I definitely think that people are saying this is a coordinated attack or whatever. I don't know about that. Some people say, it was just a flop or a blunder. But the fact that you have people trying to do an America First type event without Nick, and then those same people are trying to take shots at Nick afterwards, it does at least show that these people, first of all, don't know what they're getting into when they're trying to attack Nick and his entire audience, his entire fan base. Not only do they not know what they're doing, but, yeah, they don't know what they're doing. They're barking up the wrong tree. And it shows they also have no experience because many of these people just got red-pilled a year or two ago, and they're trying to claim to be spokespeople for the America First movement, whereas Nick has claimed to be America First for like 10 years. I mean, his show, America First, literally started in 2017. It started 9 years ago, and so he's been in this a lot longer than a lot of other people have. And so for people to try and do an America First type event without him, it's not going to work because this guy has built his entire legacy, his entire identity around being America First, and he's been very consistent over the last 9 years. He hasn't flip-flopped, unlike a lot of these other people who are trying to present themselves as, the people who've always been America First, when like I said, they just got red-pilled a year or two ago, whereas Nick has been red-pilled for almost 10 years. He's been in this fight for almost 10 years. And people are trying to say that he doesn't matter or that he's irrelevant. You know, Amy Dangerfield literally put out a post saying that the difference between me and Nick is that, unlike podcasting, I'm actually, quote, doing something. Well, listen, it's really hard for Nick to do something when people are coming after him all the time. I mean, the last AFPAC conference he hosted, the FBI had to show up because there were literally threats that were made. Someone literally showed up at his house and tried to take him out at the end of 2024. Someone else showed up at his house about a month earlier, and he had to subdue them. Nick has been in this fight a lot longer than all these other people, and he's paid a very heavy price for it. To try to do an event and start a movement without him is beyond parody at this point. And, I guess all this to say, and all that stuff. Oh, and by the way, here's a really funny thing before I go. Dan Bilzerian called out Nick again today and decided to take shots at him again. Apparently, someone found a page from his memoir. Have you seen this shit? By the way, I posted this on my Twitter, so you can all go and find it. Dan Bilzerian posted a memoir. There was a memoir. Someone posted a memoir from Dan Bilzerian himself from years ago. There's a picture. There's a page of the memoir where at the top of the page, it's a picture of him and Mel Gibson, and then the bottom of the page, he literally says, no joke, that no joke, at the bottom of that page says that he's Jewish. Isn't that funny? Like, the dude is cosplaying either as like essentially an Armenian American, which, I mean, Bilzerian is an Armenian name, but then it turns out he literally revealed in a post in response, by the way, someone asked him about that, and he literally responded on Twitter, well, 12% isn't Jewish. By the way, Fuentes is a Sephardic Jew name, which, by the way, two things on that. Number one, that is just fucking hilarious. That he literally says he's 1/8 Jewish. I mean, I guess it's true if he admits it himself, but that is so funny how he literally... that is so funny how literally Dan Bilzerian has been cosplaying as a Holocaust denier for the past 2 years, saying, I don't think it was really 6 million, blah, blah, blah. And then he reveals, oh, he's actually 1/8 Jewish or whatever. And so that's just hilarious. That's just absolutely hilarious. That's number one. And number two, also, there's no evidence at all to suggest that Nick Fuentes is Jewish. They say Fuentes is a Sephardic Jewish name. It's like, no, it's a Mexican name because he's from because his grandfather is Mexican. But also, he posted his 23andMe results years ago. I think this was like 2019, and you can go and look this up for yourself. He posted his 23andMe results. Not a single one of those ethnicities that he is listed as are Jewish. 0% Jewish. I mean, I think it lists him as like, a little bit Irish and British and Italian, a bunch Italian and Southern European and all that stuff. And I think also a little bit Portuguese, and then also like less than 1% like North African and stuff like that, I think is what it says or whatever. It's kind of, I don't know, it was kind of a weird result. It was kind of a weird result. It was a weird result table that got pulled up. Weird results, but none of them were Jewish. And so you can't accuse him of being Jewish because, the proof is in the pudding right there. So, I don't know. That's just kind of funny. But anyways, I guess this is all just to say that all of this happening is a result of trying to imagine a world and an America First movement without Nick. And you can't separate him from that. Honestly, there are so many people who are trying to claim to be America first, who, by the way, aren't. But something about Nick is he's always consistently claimed to be America first. And these people who just got red-pilled, supposedly a year or two ago, they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't been in this fight as long as Nick. They haven't been in the trenches like he has. And honestly, I really don't, I don't see this going anywhere. I think these people are going to lose in the long term because these people haven't thought it out like he has. And so, whatever you think about Nick, the dude's been consistent. The dude has, always had a long-term plan. The dude's always been trying to do things the smart way. And, anyone who thinks that, they know more than him with regards to this and who think they can do a better job, all I can say to them is good luck. Good luck, because you're going nowhere. So, yeah. That's the America First movement without Nick. That's what it's like. That at the end of the day, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So, yeah. So, yeah. Just try to imagine a world without it. And like I said, to these people who think they can do a better job than him, good luck. Good luck. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. So, yeah. Today's been a longer episode, but if you stuck around this long, thank you very much for sticking around this long. Next episode will come out tomorrow, I think. And, so remember, once again, subscribe, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share the video if you want, and thanks for hanging out for this episode. I will see you all in the next one.